So
Almost.
it was purchased in 1997. It was all the fir trees and the blackberry bushes. 99 is when it started turning over into an actual vineyard, and 2002 being our first vintage release. So the property is about 16 and a half acres planted, and I believe we own 20 some, but a lot of it is down the cliff there and potential for planting, but it would get
Very steep.
kind of hairy with the equipment. So
Yeah.
Pretty exciting, yeah. You know, find a tractor at the bottom of the ravine kind of farming.
Gotcha.
We don't really want to do that.
Everything in here is hand-picked, of course, right?
It's all hand-picked. There are roughly 23,000 vines in the vineyard. They're all handled one at a time by hand for pruning and raising all the wires and tucking the shoots and putting on clips for shoot positioning, and all of that stuff's done by hand.
Cool.
So this is the Rochot portion on the western side of the vineyard. As we mentioned, Rochot translates to rocky, and there's a perfect example of why we call it that. Mixed in with the clay, there is a lot more rocks. It's just all volcanic soil on this mountain. We found it just really gives the beauty and the minerality to the grapes.
Tom, have you found that this rocky soil affects the pH level at all compared to like other areas of the region that aren't so rocky?
I think every vineyard has a signature in terms of its pH impact. I think what we see that's consistent in our wines is a slightly higher tannin level. The wines are a little more structured. They have a certain, almost an Italian character about them that's fairly unique within the Willamette Valley. And I think that really is very much driven by the soils.
Cool. And so this is all just ancient volcanic rock?
Mm-hmm.
Very porous, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Quite soft, crumbles, and you know, like you can see a couple that were probably not too long ago one piece, and then the tractor hit them, and now they're two pieces. But what you can notice in here, these are original planted vines from 1999, and for 10, 12-year-old vines, these are awfully small. And there's at least a theory that small vines make better fruit because there's less carbohydrates in the trunk,
Mm-hmm.
the wood material, and part of one of the benefits of growing in rocky soils is that the vines tend to stay small.
So it's an inherent benefit for sure.
Absolutely.
So we had a hailstorm about a week ago, and you can see here that a number of the leaves got beat up. The plant will grow out of that. It's still, these guys are happy. It didn't affect the clusters here. So we should be fine, but a week or two ago they were looking a little bit ratty. Here's a leaf that got beat up pretty good.
Before you got here, Brian was saying that you guys trim these shoots every year and then let them come back up.
Cut them down to the two that we...
Exactly, yeah. What would happen with, this is cane pruning, and so what you've got here is obviously new shoots coming out here. What'll happen probably next year is that this whole section here will get cut off. This will get cut off, and most likely, if they survive the season, this particular shoot and this one here will probably be the shoots for next year. So that'll get laid down.
And those end up going up here to about the top wire level before the end of harvest?
Yeah, on this side of the vineyard where the soil's very rocky, they'll typically stop growing about here, and they don't even really need to be hinged, or if they do, it's fairly minimal. On the east side where it's a little more vigorous, we will hedge them twice. They'll get hedged towards the end of June, and then they'll get hedged again late July.
Okay.
And then they'll stop growing.
And the type of the different clones you're growing here are what again?
We have about 14 of them in total.
Okay.
This is 777, which you wouldn't be able to tell So Brian can bluff his way through these things.
Pomard's over on that block there. I was one block off.
Okay.
Yeah. This is the green Pinot Noir clone.
Okay. There you go.
Not to be confused with the other green Pinot Noir clone over
Yeah.
there.
Right behind you there actually is the Jackson clone. It's one of our heirloom or heritage clones that we put into the Merci. More of that is towards the south end of the vineyard, but that is our small portion of Jackson. Just a few rows of that.
So
Jacksons were originated, they're selections that were planted in California in the late 1800s, brought over from Burgundy by, we haven't a clue, but
But you're glad they're here?
They were obviously selections that at the time people felt were of quality and interest. They were planted in California, most likely in the late 1800s, and they were collected into a mother block vineyard in the town of Jackson, which is where they get their name from. And we've been expanding in the heritage clones. There's 3 Jackson clones that will go in here, and then we also have several different versions of Calera and certified Swan, and a couple different versions of Mount Eden. In contrast to some of the other ones we were looking at here, we've got this little cluster that's just the size of a fingertip. Some of the, there's a more medium-sized one. We've got one big one over here, but a more typical cluster would probably look like that. But here's a shoot that, we've only got the one cluster here, and then again, smaller clusters there. So Swan's particularly noted for teeny tiny clusters, very concentrated fruit. And to your earlier question, it appears that it's going to be higher acid wine. Swan doesn't put on as much sugar, and it seems to hold its acid. So we'll see. We're
Cool.
learning. These are young vines. We'll get a couple more vintages under our belt, and we'll know more about them.
nice.
One of the also interesting clones we have planted here, we haven't mentioned, is called Mariafeld, which I believe we have a few rows of down here, but we also have some up towards the house. It's a Swiss clone, and it goes into the Diversité. And it's really interesting, especially when it's fully grown. It's when the clusters are grown, it's a very wild-looking cluster. It's not a
Kind of
very,
gnarly looking, huh?
exactly. It's
Yeah.
not a very pretty, beautiful, tight cluster.
If you could sum up in a few sentences what you feel that really differentiates you guys from other Pinot producers in the area, what would that be?
Well, for sure, rocky soils. I mean, typically, Oregon vineyards are grown on fairly fertile, fairly deep soils that usually are decomposed. There may be a little bit of rock in them, but we're essentially just growing on solid, broken volcanic basalt. So that's probably the number one difference. Clonal selection would be another one. Typically, most Oregon properties are planted with the usual Dijons and Pomard clones. We have all of the heritage clones that we talked about, and increasingly so. And I would say a third major difference is the way we divide the vineyard and group different parcels into creating cuvées that each have their own unique expression of what the Cadeau Vineyard's all about. Those would be the major differences.
Cool.